Hearing, like this message Brian left me.
Hey, Jake from State Farm. I love the smell of my cat's breath. Yeah.
You don't need to get that personal. The State Farm Personal Price Plan helps you create an affordable price just for you. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Call or go to statefarm.com for a quote today.
Prices vary by state. Options selected by customer. Availability and eligibility may vary.
No H2O is the leading waterless mobile auto detailer in the Bay Area, offering a full range of detailing services. No H2O comes to your home, business, or wherever is most convenient for you and gives your car a great wash with no water. No H2O auto detailing is ultra convenient and gets great scratch-free results for your car. And remember, no water is used. Call Brian today at 925-238-8182, 925-238-8182, or visit them at noh2owalnutcreek.com.
Whether on or off the court, the keys to success are the same. On the court, it's ball movement. Off the court, it's workflow. On the court, teams call plays to execute their game plan. Off the court, companies rely on systems to run their business smoothly. MRC Smart Technology Solutions, a Xerox company, is the official copier and office solutions provider of the Golden State Warriors. We offer large and small companies the technology they need to transform the way they work. Visit MRC360.com to learn more today.
You've been listening to the Golden State Warriors Audio Network, presented by United Airlines.
This has been a presentation of Odyssey Sports. For even more coverage of your team, download the free Odyssey app and listen to your
for Golden State in this one, up 96-82 with about 11 minutes to go in the game, and then a 21-6 run for the Timberwolves to take the lead, basically back and forth from that point, and the Warriors wind up falling in overtime to the Timberwolves, 119-114. We welcome you inside Warriors wrap-up here on 95.7 The Game. John Dickinson with you till about 9 o'clock, 888-957-9570. That is the phone number to give me a call or shoot me a text. And as we've done so many different times throughout the course of this season, tonight is a night for you, the Warrior fan, to vent about yet another fourth quarter collapse. And let's be honest, it's on the stars. Like, we can quibble about some of the deficiencies about this team and a lack of depth in certain areas or a lack of size in certain iterations. But the bottom line for the Warriors in this game is the fact that Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Andrew Wiggins, Draymond Green, Jordan Poole didn't do enough with a 14-point lead down the stretch, and the Warriors basically gave the game away with defensive miscues and horrific turnovers and really shots that might as well have been turnovers because the Warriors just got three happy, looked like a tired team, although being a tired team is not an excuse when you had a day off yesterday and when you know that you're going to probably have a developmental game tomorrow where the championship core players are going to be able to rest. And I don't think tonight had anything to do with the Warriors not bringing the full effort or not being locked in. Tonight was flat out just about execution and a failure to be good enough down the stretch in this game, even though you look up and the Warriors have 7 players in double figures, even though you look up and the Warriors get to the free throw line 34 times and knock down 27 of them. when they're the 30th team out of a 30-team league in terms of getting to the free throw line. The Warriors did cool after a hot start from three-point range, rare night where the opposition beats them from three, and in the final 5-6 minutes of regulation and the 5-minute overtime period, the Warriors really just casting off from three. Look at the overtime numbers, 2 of 8. They took 5 threes out of the 8 shots, and they had 3 turnovers in the overtime. After turnovers were a big problem for the Warriors at the beginning of this game, they were able to slow the turnovers down and really, even though the game was back and forth, be able to be somewhat in control, leading to the run that put them up 14 with about 11 minutes to go. So too many of these games over the course of the season. It feels like it's about the 7th or the 8th time we've been on here on Warriors Wrap-Up talking about the Warriors taking an L in this fashion to varying degrees of opponent. Some nights it's been the Boston Celtics who have done this, a team that is a defending Eastern Conference champion and one that has given the Warriors fits over the years and played them to a 6-game NBA Finals. And some nights it's been the Orlando Magic or the Charlotte Hornets, 2 of the bottom feeders in the Eastern Conference of the NBA. And it frankly hasn't mattered. The Warriors just have had too many of these games where it seems like they're in control, and we're used to them doing just enough to close the game out, as they did in Oklahoma City the other night. But the Warriors unable to do it on a second consecutive game, and so the 3-game winning streak is stopped, and the Warriors again unable to get to the 3-game over 500 mark. Third opportunity to get to 3 games over 500, which would have been a new high water mark for this team on the season. They were 13-11 and then lost 2 in a row to go right back to 500, and then the injuries came. They were 20-18 and then lost 3 in a row to dip at the midway point. That was the 5-game home winning streak and the 8-game homestand, followed by the 3-game losing streak. So they were 20-21 at the midway point. And then the Warriors worked themselves with this latest stretch all the way back up to 2 over 500 again at 26-24. And they take the loss tonight, unable to get to +3. And this is another one of those games, unfortunately, for the Warriors, where this loss leads to them being in a developmental mode type game tomorrow, where they're probably going to rest their stars in Denver on the second of a back-to-back. And I think the Warriors, you could tell tonight, and I think that's what makes it all the more perplexing, all the more frustrating in looking at this game from the Warriors standpoint, is the fact that they did go for this one. They did go all in. They had the look from very early on and the purpose, and were playing hard to the point where you could tell almost that it was understood, if not outright said, that this is a game you want to get, knowing that tomorrow is probably going to be a game that's going to be a lot more difficult to get. And so the Warriors, and we'll see how it plays out. They did the last time they were in one of these situations, blowing a lead in Boston, came back in a game where they rested the stars and won at Cleveland. So you can never completely rule a game like that out. But that's been the only time the Warriors have won in that extremely shorthanded developmental game mode. So unfortunately, this loss projects into being 2 losses. And then when you look at the NBA standings, you're feeling good about where the Warriors are at coming into tonight, because their 3-game winning streak could put them right back in 5th in the Western Conference and on the heels of 4th, and looking at Sacramento potentially in 3rd as somebody that they could chase down. But now you look up at the end of the night, and the Warriors wind up being 9th in the conference, with some other teams jockeying around and being able to win. And now you look at potentially another loss tomorrow night, and the uphill climb continues for Golden State, as they just cannot separate. They cannot separate, and the biggest reason why they've been unable to separate is the inability to close games down the stretch with leads on the road, and they just flat out haven't been good enough to win these games on the road. And at some point, I think you do have to start to ask the question, are the Warriors going to start winning these games in the playoffs down the stretch that they keep losing over and over in the regular season? I think it's fair to ask the question now that we're at February 1st and we're basically at the 51 game mark now with 31 games to go. Is there a point where you start to think maybe this team is getting a little bit older, maybe this team is a little bit tireder, that maybe this team can't make the shots in the key moments at the consistent level that they used to offset some of their other mistakes when it comes to turnovers or lack of execution? They've always been so good at making the big shot and making the big defensive stop that I think sometimes some of the deficiencies in some of those areas have been basically covered up. At times, and the Warriors have always won enough for the most part with this group to where you're not really overly concerned on a night here or a night there where they're unable to get the job done. But you look at just so many games over the course of this season that they've let slip away. Charlotte, back on October the 29th, you look at that one, they lose in overtime 120-113. Miami was a back-and-forth game on the road. They lost. Orlando was a game where they blew a third-quarter lead and ended up losing by a point. I mean, that's 3 just on the first lengthy Eastern trip of the season. And then there's so many others just recently when you look at it, whether it's a game in Dallas on November the 29th. You look at a game against Boston a couple of weeks ago, the game against Brooklyn when they're up 12 with about 5 minutes to go. And they can't win that game in their most recent defeat. And the Warriors really could be in a position where if a couple of these go their way, they're already looking at the third spot in the conference and now unable to do it. And so they're going to have to take the lump tonight, and they're going to have to take their lump potentially tomorrow. Although, again, I'm not going to just rule that one as an automatic because you can't really do that. The Warriors proved otherwise at least once the last time they were in this position. So 888-957-9570, 888-957-9570. John Dickinson here on Warriors Wrap-Up, a 95.7 The Game. Timberwolves won 19, Warriors won 14. And the Warriors now dip back to 26-25. Minnesota improves to 28-26. Let's get to Armand in San Jose, getting us tipped off here tonight on Warriors Wrap-Up. What's up, Armand?
Hey, what's going on, JD?
What's up, man?
This is so frustrating. It reminds me too much of the play-in year. I got to be honest, JD, and I mentioned this last time I was on here. I hear all this stuff about trades. Unless you're getting a Kevin Durant, what player is fixing this? As you stated, look at the leads. The starters are blowing. These are the starters. You can't blame this on the youngsters who don't even play. Like, I have a big issue with people not calling out the fact that Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond, and the rest cannot close out games. And Steph, wide open mid-range to win it, at least force Minnesota have to take a 2 to tie it, could make it. We had so many opportunities of careless turnovers, these stupid, unforced turnovers that we make in critical situations. Some of the shots that we were taking. It's just the thing that is really disappointing about this season is that you got some guys who look like they still have it in them to do more, but they're just not, and you can't figure out why. But it's also the fact that the teams that they're doing it to are more bothersome to me. You're not doing this really just like against the Milwaukee's and stuff. Like the Phoenix game was telling to me. New Jersey. Brooklyn without Kevin Durant, and you had an 18-point lead at that game at home. Like, there are things that this team is doing that I just don't understand how anybody in their right mind who claims to know basketball can think that somehow trading James Wiseman for Jakob Poeltl is going to fix this.
Thanks for the call, Armand. No, I don't think that kind of trade is going to do it. I do think, and Bob Myers was on with Steiny and Goober earlier today, he talked about wanting to increase the margin for error, and that's what they're looking at as far as maybe doing something at the trade deadline. I do think you look at a night like tonight, and fatigue was clearly a factor. I know we're going to play Steve Kerr's press conference. He kind of downplayed the fatigue component, but fatigue was clearly a factor down the stretch. It's not an excuse, but I think that's what happens when you feel like you can only play 8 or 9 players and you're riding your starters. Once the game goes into overtime, it gets beyond the normal minutes that those guys are regularly playing. But this team is not as deep as the other teams have been over the years. It's not as deep as last year's team. And so when you can only play 8.5, 9, sometimes 10, but really during this last stretch as the Warriors have hunkered down, it's been basically 8. And so I think when you look at a trade, it really, to me, comes down to, is there one more playable wing player that gives the Warriors a little bit more margin for error to where that guy can get put right into the rotation and you can trust him along with the other players that you have started to develop trust in down the stretch. But again, tonight's not about any of that other than the fatigue factor, to where if you have a more expanded rotation over the last handful of games and you're able to win, then maybe these guys are not quite as tired down the stretch and they can hit another shot or two or make another play defensively down the stretch in the game to allow yourself to win it. So I think that's more what the Warriors are looking at as far as just having the additional margin for error and all of that. 888-957-9570. Looking at the juxtaposition as far as the three-point shooting, first half Warriors were 9 of 18. I mentioned that they cooled. Second half, 2 for 17 on threes. You include the overtime in that, and we talked about what the Warriors were in the overtime overall. 0 of 5 from 3 in the overtime. So it was even worse in the overtime. And you look at Steph and Clay, you look at Poole and Clay and Wiggins, 4 of 16 from 3 for the game. Klay Thompson, brilliant January. February starts off with a clunker for Klay Thompson, 3 of 13, 2 of 7 from 3, 14 points. He played 40 minutes. And in case there was any doubt as to what the Warriors were going to do tomorrow in Denver, just look at Klay 40, Steph 42, Draymond 39, Wiggins 35. I don't think any of those guys are playing tomorrow night in Denver, and so it goes for the Warriors as they dip back to 1 over, and there's a great shot, although not a foregone conclusion, that they're going to wind up being back to 500 again and having to start to climb back up when they get home on Saturday to take on the Dallas Mavericks. All right, 888-957-9570. Let's go to Tim in North Carolina next here on Warriors Wrap Up. What's going on, Tim?
JD, what's up, man? I love you, man. I really do. But the caller, man, I couldn't agree more with everything he said. JD, you letting him off the hook, man. This guy plays 8, 9 people because he trusts absolutely no one. No one. These guys, they get tired. They get reckless with the ball. I've never seen high-level players make the turnovers that they make in crunch time. We have players that can get to the rim. He gives them 14 minutes a game and nothing more, nothing less. He trusts no one. So we're going to bring somebody from the outside, this mystery wing, that if they're not the right kind of Steve Kerr player, they get no run. We got a 7-footer. Yes, I know Wiseman is whatever he is, but when this team is doing nothing but jacking 3 after 3 after 3, and they have no ability to get to the rim, the one player sits on the bench when you need it probably the most in Kuminga. The other player, Steve Kerr admits that the kid Wiseman could get you 20 points right now. He already admits, he can go average 20 right now. Put him out there when you need to get a bucket, JD. We know he's not the defensive player. Put him out there when you need to get a bucket, man. He plays 9 or 10 because he trusts no one. And what do you got to lose at this point, JD? You said 3 or 4 games. We are in the double figures of games that they have blown. Double. I don't even keep track anymore, Jay. But it's been all the starters who blow them. And look how they blow them, Jay. Number one, Jordan Poole is so weak. He cannot control the ball. He almost loses the ball at every crunch time situation. And the way they just miss jumper after jumper, and the other teams take it right to their necks, to the rack. And we have no one that can do it consistently. And the one who can, again, like I said, he gets his 8 minutes first half, his 7 minutes second half, and he doesn't come back in the game. And he'll get you a quick 10 points, and we act like it just didn't happen. I mean, Jay.
Thanks for the call. Look, when it comes down to who you trust, Kuminga wasn't good tonight. Okay, and Wiseman is not good enough to be a rotation player. You're not going to throw Wiseman into a game down the stretch when you've had a 14-point lead because Steph Curry starts turning the ball over. Like it just doesn't work that way. It really doesn't. And the reality is a lot of these young players are not playing because they're not good enough. Now, that's a completely different conversation as to why they're not and who's to blame for that. And we can get into that if you want. But the blame, if you want to put the blame on the Stars, I'm fine with that. I put the blame on the Stars tonight because the Stars are the guys who played the bulk of the minutes when they know they're going to get tomorrow off and they know that they need this game. But I also don't think that it's a lack of effort tonight. I just think this is push coming to shove a little bit with the Warriors getting a little bit older and having to work a lot harder to earn some of the wins that they've earned to this point. And when you turn to the depth beyond about 3 off the bench, let's be honest, Poole, DiVincenzo, and Kuminga are the only 3 trusted, and Kuminga was brutal at the beginning of the fourth quarter defensively. He didn't play well tonight. It happens. But that doesn't mean that you don't go to Kuminga because Klay Thompson is taking bad threes in the final 4 minutes of a game. Like that, again, that's just not how it works. Like at some point you trust your superstar Hall of Fame players to bring you home, and if they can't get it done, then you as a team just aren't good enough. Now you can look at win the game at other times throughout the course of the game, win the game in other stretches, but at that point, you got to be, maybe you're a little bit deeper in other stretches of the game, but the truth is they don't have enough good players. And I'm not blaming Steve Kerr for not trusting Moody or James Wiseman or anybody else, Patrick Baldwin Jr. at this point. Like, I'm sorry, I'm just not, because when those players have been on the floor, they haven't been good enough. So you ride your heavy-duty artillery to try and get a win, talking about future Hall of Famers, and if they can't get it done, then tonight's a perfect example of you just have to look in the mirror and acknowledge the fact that Steph wasn't good enough tonight and had 4 turnovers and was in foul trouble and looked so tired that he wanted to just shoot jumpers instead of attacking the basket. That's what you do when you're fatigued. You take jumpers. It's the easy shot. It's the easy way out. And the Warriors did a lot of that. And we've seen a lot of times this season the Warriors make shots in those situations, and it's been the reason why they've won the games that they've won. Tonight, it didn't happen, and the Timberwolves are one thing they are. I don't think they're the highest IQ team, but they are, at least the guys that were playing tonight, have a little edge to them. They like to attack, and they like to get to the basket. And, I mean, you look at a guy like Naz Reid, who gets an opportunity to start, goes for 24 and 13, and for Rudy Gobert. I mean, when have we ever seen Rudy Gobert put his imprint on a game against the Warriors the way Naz Reid did tonight? I mean, we haven't. It probably worked out to the Timberwolves' advantage that Gobert wasn't playing in that game tonight, because Naz Reid brings a little something in his game that is tough for an aging Warriors team to deal with. But if you're going to offset some of the youth that some of these other teams have and energy and athleticism, you got to do it with players that are capable of getting on the court. Like, I can't do the whole, tell me Steph and Klay and Draymond don't do enough and Wiggins, but Kuminga would have on a night like tonight where he got ripped out of the game because he was terrible defensively the first 3-4 minutes of the fourth quarter, and Steve Kerr pulled him out because it was starting to be a run. I mean, Steph Curry was on the court at the beginning of the fourth quarter because of the foul trouble in the third, out of his normal rotation. Warriors are up 14. You're thinking, hey, if they can put this thing up to 17 or 18 with about 6 minutes to go, they probably got it in the bag. That should work in the Warriors' favor tonight. And then it doesn't happen because they can't make a shot. They turn the basketball over. They start fouling and just give up some offensive rebounds. And then it winds up in a back-and-forth game down the stretch. And when it winds up in a back-and-forth game down the stretch, for whatever reason on the road, the Warriors just have not been able to execute at a high enough level to win enough of these games. That is the story of this year's team, which is very much, I agree with Tim in North Carolina on this point, it's very much similar to the team 2 years ago that was the 8th seed and ultimately lost to Memphis in the play-in tournament and didn't make the playoffs. I think this team's better than that team, but it's on them to go out and prove it. And every time it looks like they're about to go prove it, there's a game like tonight that gets in the way, and then typically that game has turned into 2 or 3 other losses along with it, Look at tomorrow in Denver potentially, and then they have to restart that climb again. And every time you start to restart the climb, if you're the Warriors, it's that much harder because it's that much later in the season, and there's that much more attrition on the body. And these guys aren't getting any younger. That's just the reality of the situation on nights where they don't come through. 888-957-9570. Robin in San Francisco next. What's going on, Robin?
Hey, nothing too much, JD. I guess sometimes you and I, we think so much alike. You steal my thunder here. I just want to point out, how many of our callers always like to point to Poole, but they floss over Curry. And some of the things that I just don't understand. Well, I'm not getting down on it, but in terms of, it's hard being an athlete, so I like to respect that fact. But when you just throw the ball away in a crucial, pivotal time, unenforced error, that's a mental thing. It seems like, and then Draymond traveling because Curry was cutting. Why don't you just stick to doing something very basic instead of all this backdoor stuff? Sometimes, so what I noticed about the starters is that they seem that they weren't focused. They didn't seem cohesive. I'm not a rock. I don't have a crystal ball to say where that comes from. Also, the fatigue factor, maybe age, but I just want to say this. Whether it's fair or not, it's just my honest opinion. Curry was tired, and I think, Curry feels a responsibility to carry this team and put it on his back sometimes. Everybody got on Jordan Poole in that game where he got ejected because he didn't pass the ball. Sure, he should have passed the ball, but Curry clapping like that kind of reminded me of KD clapping with Draymond. It's like, I think he could sometimes do a little bit better himself. You know what I mean? You don't have to carry the weight because I know it's his competitive nature, but I think something's got to change there too. I could be wrong. I hope I make sense. Bye, sweetie.
No, appreciate it, Robin. No, you're making a lot of sense. I think Curry's been a little more demonstrative and frustrated than we've seen him be in the past, because he knows in his mind how close this team is to being fine, really, in the standings. Tim, I think, we're closer to agreeing, going back to Tim in North Carolina's call from a couple of callers ago. It's more like 8 to 10 games. Now, you don't win them all, but the Warriors would tell you they've lost more than their fair share of these games because of their inability to execute down the stretch. But if you put 4 wins out of, let's say, 8 or 10 games that the Warriors have let get away, now, hell, don't even win half of them, but you win 3 or 4 of them, you're looking at 30-2. You'd already be the 3 seed. And at that point, yeah, it'd be a little disappointing that this team maybe didn't have a little bit better record, but everybody would say they're fine. They're figuring it out, championship hangover, whatever. But when you lose as many as they've lost, and it's just been a ton, then it really it sets you up to be in this position, in this glut of mediocrity. And at some point, I do think it's fair to ask, are the Warriors going to start winning these games in the playoffs, in the clutch situations, when they haven't, won them, and they lose them over and over and over in the regular season? And a couple of texters even said, JD, well, what if they don't make the playoffs? And yeah, that's very much on the table right now, because they just can't separate. And 5 goes to 9 when you lose tonight. You go from 5th to 9th in the West, and you're probably going to lose tomorrow. We'll see how that shakes out. And you might end up even worse at that point in time, at the end of the night tomorrow. And then, let's say you get another injury that leads to a 1-4 type of a stretch, and then you're in big trouble at that point. And it's right there in front of the Warriors to avoid it. And I think they see that. Again, tonight is not effort. Tonight is you're playing another team that's basically got the same record as you do, and they're building. You already beat them once. They're a little bit shorthanded. Actually, you're more than a little bit shorthanded when you look at Gobert being out and Towns being out. They're a lot shorthanded, and you get them down 14 early in the fourth quarter, and you can't close the deal. That's beyond tough. There's no doubt about it. All right, 888-957-9570. We'll get to some text messages on the Xfinity mobile text line. coming up here in just a second, but let's go ahead and hear a couple of minutes. It was short and sweet from Steve Kerr at Target Center in Minneapolis following another close Warriors defeat.
Things happened offensively in the fourth and into overtime.
I thought, we had control of the game, and then I thought we just kind of gift wrapped it. And not to take anything away from Minnesota, I thought they were great. They took advantage of our mistakes and our lack of execution. And D'Lo got hot, and guys made big shots, but we missed box outs. We threw the ball away. We took really difficult shots. So everything we had done to that point to have control of the game, we stopped doing. So we got what we deserved.
I mean, there's been a lot of.
Yeah, a lot of.
Their common thread to you. I mean, why?
Execution. I mean, I know it's just a catchphrase or whatever you want to call it, but it's the truth. You have to execute. These are the best players in the world, even with their guys out. If you want to hand a team a few possessions, then we got guys who are going to take advantage. D'Lo hits like 3 threes after we throw the ball away a few times, and the whole game changes. So if you want to win, especially on the road, you have to execute. And, we've probably lost, 5-6 games like this on the road this year, just because of a lack of execution. We're not good enough to win without executing. We might have been a few years ago. We're not good enough now to win without executing in the fourth quarter on the road. So we're trying to correct that. We're trying to work on that, and we got to do better.
How do you address that? Is it just happen?
You show film and you practice, and that's all you can do. We will continue to try to address it and try to get better.
You went with the 8-game rotation in the second half. Did anybody see fatigue from
the game went overtime, and Steph and Clay got to 42 and 40 minutes. So you take the overtime away, and they're right in their normal range. We had yesterday off, so I didn't think fatigue was a factor. I thought just mentally we were not sharp, and we gave a bunch of possessions away, both, as I mentioned, throwing the ball to them and not boxing out, not corralling rebounds, and then just taking really tough shots. A lot of those were just shot turnovers. Just couldn't get buckets when we needed them.
It's safe to assume some big men.
I have no idea.
All right, so Steve Kerr, short and sweet from Minneapolis there. Here on Warriors Wrap-Up on 95.7 The Game. 888-957-9570, 888-957-9570. And, yeah, there's been too many of these, no doubt, as the Warriors 14-point lead, 96-82, with 11 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. And it winds up in overtime, and the Warriors lose 119-114. And you look at this game tonight, and again, down the stretch, once it becomes a close game after the Warriors lost the lead, just too many turnovers. Too many turnovers. How about the miscommunication between Steph and Draymond, I think it was, where Steph just throws the ball out of bounds at midcourt as the Warriors are bringing the ball up. The travel by Draymond Green, just brutal in the overtime session. And you just a lot of really bad, quick heat check kind of bailout shots for the Warriors in this one after the Timberwolves went on the 7-0 run there after the Warriors got the lead up to 96-82. And, yeah, it was D'Angelo Russell taking advantage, and the turnover problems were back in. Curry picked up his 5th foul, which I think really made him more attackable. I thought Jordan Poole had a couple of good defensive plays in that fourth quarter, but I think Curry was out of whack somewhat by fatigue. And again, not an excuse, but just part of the deal. And also the 5th foul on the Xfinity Mobile text line, weird rotation to start the fourth. It felt like chasing a win, and it backfired. Curry was gassed by the middle of the fourth. And I think what happened there was the fact that Steph was subbed early because of the foul trouble and picking up his 4th foul in the third quarter. So he comes back in the fourth quarter because he didn't play the whole third quarter. And you're thinking at that point with the 14-point lead that you're going to at least maintain it with Steph on the floor to where it's double digits, and you can get him a little bit of a mid-quarter rest, even if it's only like 2 minutes. But it bit the Warriors because before you could even start thinking about Steph being able to sit down for that rest to make sure he's fresh for the final 4 or 5 minutes, the Timberwolves are on you and back in the game. And so at that point, once they're on a run and it's now a 4 or 5 point game from being a 14-point game, in the moment in which you would be giving Steph Curry his rest, you can't do it at that point. You can't give him the rest. And so he ends up playing the entire fourth quarter, and then the game goes into overtime, which, of course, he's got to play the overtime session. And at that point, you find yourself, the whole thing kind of snowballs on you. And whereas if you're able to maintain that lead, maybe you take him out, you sub him, you get him a little bit of a breather, and you come back in and he's fresh for the final couple of minutes. I think that definitely was part of the deal, and it was one of those deals where the Warriors being able to build the lead up to 14 there early in the fourth quarter, it kind of bit them because the rotation was out of whack, and Steve Kerr was trying to use the fact that the rotation was out of whack, but the Warriors had the lead to their advantage. And then it just threw everything off down the stretch. Andrew Wiggins not out there. In a lot of the lineups, there was a point where they were going offense-defense, I think because of Curry's foul trouble with the 5 fouls. And so Wiggins was out there for defense, and then Curry would come back in for offense, and Looney was out there through stretches, although not in the overtime once things got rolling. And then you just didn't see Kuminga again after Kuminga played so poorly at the beginning of the fourth quarter. That doesn't mean Kuminga's not going to play or be in the rotation in the future, but not every player has the same set of not every player you can't as a young player play really bad the first 3-4 minutes of the fourth quarter and then think that you're going to get another opportunity to close the game on that night. And we've seen Steve Kerr close the game with Kuminga. And I think Kuminga is one of the handful of players that can be out there for the Warriors in stretches. But tonight was not going to be the night because he didn't earn it tonight. He didn't play well in the game tonight. And I'm going to credit Tim Kawakami of The Athletic here because I just happened to see one of his tweets pop up. And I'm going to use this as the example for the player, for the fans that are talking about wanting more of the young players and more of the depth. Moses Moody's got a negative 8.9 net rating. So he's at 8.9 in the minus. Wiseman's a 25.3 net rating in the minus. Baldwin is a minus 26.5. And the only Warrior, I'm quoting from Tim's tweet, that's worse is Ryan Rollins at a minus 39. And so when you're chasing wins in a season where you feel like you're getting extra opportunities to be in a position that in another season you'd never have a shot to sniff at, we'd already be talking about 8 seed, 10 seed, play-in tournament. We'd already be talking about that in most years. But because the Western Conference is so mediocre and so bad, the Warriors can be a game over 500 and basically a game and a half to 2 games out of fourth. And so the Warriors, because of that, are doubling and tripling down now that they're healthy again with their main guys to try and go extra in this little stretch before the All-Star break to stockpile some wins to where maybe they can be in that 4 spot by the break, the way things have been going. And so, that's not the time to be tinkering around and saying, the worst players in terms of net rating on your roster need to be getting time because Steph Curry, shoots poorly down the stretch in a game, or because Klay Thompson has his first bad game in about 5 weeks, or at least his worst game in about 5 weeks after the sensational January. It doesn't work that way. You can't have it both ways. Does this team want to develop the young players, or do they want to try to be a 3 seed, even if it only takes 44, 45 wins to be a 3 seed this year? Because I think that's the point where if the Warriors can get to that stretch, then maybe they can make a run. Although the way that they've run out of gas in a lot of these games down the stretch over the first 3.5 months of the season would lead me to at least question whether or not this team still has as much in the tank as they used to in these situations come playoff time. Although nobody's going to doubt the champion's blood component to what's going on with this Warriors team. All right. 888-957-9570. Excuse me there. John Dickinson on Warriors Wrap-Up on 95.7 The Game as the Timberwolves beat the Warriors 119-114 Warriors dip now to 26-25. Timberwolves up to 28-26. And you heard Steve Kerr asked by Anthony Slater about tomorrow night, about 2 minutes into the Steve Kerr press conference. And Steve Kerr basically, I don't know, we're calling it a night on the press conference at that point in time. But I think as far as tomorrow goes, tomorrow is one of those games where I would expect all of the regulars to be out and the young players to be in to start and play a lot of minutes against Denver. We saw the Warriors do that. 510 on the Xfinity mobile text line, and I think this is spot on. Very disappointing. Live by the three, die by the three, and tonight was another die by the three night for the Warriors. They've lived by the three a lot. There have been a ton of games this year where you look up and they are 18, 19, 20 out of 40, 22 out of 45. I mean, there have been a lot of ridiculous shooting games for the Warriors over the course of this season where you look up and you're like, damn, like you can understand why they really want to shoot as many threes. Tonight they only took 35, so it wasn't like they took a ton, and 35 in an overtime game really isn't a lot. And the Warriors have tried, I think, to move forward, not taking as many three-pointers as they had been early in the year. Lately, been trying to attack more ball movement, the smaller lineup, trying to spread and stretch the floor, create some more lanes to drive and have a little bit more of a drive and kick component to their offense. But yeah, this is just a brutal loss. And I think tonight, they got to the free throw line at 10. I mean, that's the thing that stings tonight is the fact that, on the surface, and there wasn't a lot of efficiency to it, the Warriors did not shoot the ball well tonight. 41.8 overall, 31.4 from three, only made 11 threes, which is extremely low for them. But you look at 7 in double figures and 27 to 34 at the free throw line, and you're thinking that's a win. And it's not a win because of some of the offensive rebounds. You look at the ability to for Minnesota to have some extra possessions because of the turnovers, and it was 17, but 24 points off the 17 turnovers is really, really tough. And that's where the Timberwolves were able to make some hay in this game. And Steve Kerr mentioned it, the fact that D'Lo hits a couple of threes, and he can get as hot as anybody over some short stretches, and he knocks in a couple of threes off of some turnovers, and all of a sudden a 14-point game's a 2-point game, and then you got to go win the game again. And the Warriors just have not been able to do it, and it adds up to another terrible loss for the Warriors in a season where it has been full of them. And, yeah, I think it is probably approaching or at double digits at this point in time. And you're not going to win all of these games. Maybe if you're going to go 73-9, you're going to win all of them. We saw that going back 7 years ago. But I think the Warriors would tell you of the 10 or so, they probably should have 3 or 4 more at a minimum. And if they did, there wouldn't be a lot of problems right now when you look up at the standings. But you got to take where things are at, and your record is what you are, as Bill Parcells said. And the Warriors find themselves now at 26-25 and in the glut now with the Jazz, who got a win tonight, and the Pelicans continue to lose. They've dropped 9 in a row. They're all the way back down to 10th in the West, and Portland and OKC and the Lakers are all looming there within a couple of games of the Warriors and the rest of that glut. All right. 888-957-9570. It's John Dickinson here on Warriors Wrap-Up on 95.7 The Game. A couple of more text messages here before we call it a night. 925, Warriors had no offense in the second half. JD, the vets have let the Warriors down this year, not the young players. Look, it always comes back to your best players. Right? That's just it. You're always going to go as far as your best players take you. It's Steph, it's Clay, it's Draymond, it's Wiggins, it's Jordan Poole. I think that's a fair statement. I also think it's fair to say that the young players being unplayable at the level that they've been unplayable has let this team down as well. And again, we can get into a deeper conversation as to why that is and how much of it is on them, how much of it is it on the development of it, how much of it is the disconnect between the veterans and the way that you have to play with them versus the way that you have to play on nights where maybe they're not around, and it's games like we're probably going to see tomorrow. I think that's all a factor. I was a bit surprised as well as we close it out on this note from the 510. Why didn't JaMychal Green play tonight? It's a great question. I think they could have used his interior defense and rebounding. That one was a surprise. And on a night where Kurt basically played 7, he played 9 in total, but played really 7. Kuminga played 15. Anthony Lamb only played 7 minutes. I was a little surprised that JaMychal Green didn't get a few minutes to get out there and try and bring some energy, maybe knock down a 3, get an offensive board or something like that. But he's been a no-go here now for a couple of games consecutively, and maybe they're saving him for tomorrow because they know they're going to need a lot of the guys that haven't been playing of late to be playing tomorrow. That's the one thing we'll know. We'll get a taste of Wiseman and Moody and Baldwin and a heavier dose of Kuminga and all of these guys tomorrow. Ty Jerome probably going to be back after being inactive for a handful of games since the Warriors have been healthier at the guard line. As they try to play shorthanded in all likelihood at Denver and pull off another one to get a winning trip. But this one, make no mistake, really stings. All right, that'll do it for me. Quick turnaround. Damon and Rado will have Warriors Live for you tomorrow. That is at 5 o'clock at the back end of their show, and then the Warriors and the Nuggets, 6 o'clock here Pacific on 95.7 The Game, and then I'll have Warriors wrap up for you after the game, taking your phone calls as always here as we discuss Warriors basketball at the end of this trip and getting closer to the All-Star break. So thanks to Sterling Bennett and everybody in our San Francisco studios. Great job cutting up the highlights and the post-game sound. I'm John Dickinson. We'll talk to you tomorrow as the Timberwolves beat the Warriors 119-114 in overtime. And you heard it all right here on 95.7 The Game.
Did you know that the average price of a used car is up over 40% from just a year ago? The cost of living has gone up, and the cost for auto repairs is rising as well. The car you have needs to last you longer than ever. So if your vehicle has less than 150,000 miles with an auto warranty about to expire, or with no warranty coverage at all, you need to call CarShield at 800-523-9985. We've just announced a low-cost month-to-month vehicle service plan to help save thousands of dollars on out-of-pocket expenses for future auto repairs. While the cost for new and used cars continue to go up, CarShield offers protection plans at an all-time low. Drivers who activate their plan today will also receive 24/7 coast-to-coast roadside assistance, courtesy towing, and emergency tire, battery, and key lockout service. Call 800-523-9985 today to save